Okay, and yet another video from the Reloved Guitars workshop. Excuse me. I would like to bring you an interesting little number. And this is pre-Trev Wilkinson, I think. Pre-Trev Wilkinson vintage brand Les Paul copy. And this is an interesting one because it's different from the V99s and the V100s. Being an earlier model, it's slightly thinner, so it's not as heavy as the other things, which I quite like. But also, whereas the others, the V100s, tend to go heavy on the body and thin on the neck, this is the opposite, and this goes thinner on the body and heavier on the neck. And something about that I quite like. It appeals to some players more than others. So I was really interested to see what this would be like, and I have to say, first impressions, I'm not really disappointed. There's a lot of discussion about, you know, the good or bad around pre-Wilkinson vintage guitars. And honestly, I've not found anything bad so far about the pre-Wilkinson guitars. I can't even really tell that much difference between the pickups on this and the pickups on the Wilkinson vintage guitars, in that these seem fine. They're good and crunchy, and it plays surprisingly well, tuned up well. A bit of slack in the strings, pull that out and it seems to stay in tune fairly well. So yeah, I'm kind of encouraged by this. I think it'll set up really nicely. The frets are quite well played. It's had a good life, but having said that, they've got a lot of wear, but it's their first. This will be their first fret dressing, so there's enough room in there, enough metal in there to go through that, which is good news. So yeah, just see, chunky sound. It's got the blend of sounds that you'd expect, so it's quite nicely balanced pickups. Sharp bridge for cutting through. Nice sort of, don't even know how you describe that when you mix the bridge and the neck together, but it has a little sort of magical sparkle to it. And then in the neck, it's got the tone for those lead bits, and that's on a clean setting, a jazz chorus setting. So as soon as you kind of crank it up into the classic amp model, almost too dirty. Rectifier. Sorry, that's the mic setting. Rectifier setting. Classic. robust, very clean sound. So as just a quick one-off, that plays really well. I'm not disappointed in that at all, just a little bit different. I guarantee you there will be some V100 snobs out there who will happily spend all day telling you how crap this is. It has a few little, dings and bangs and whatnot. It's lived a little bit, this guitar. But first impressions, I would say, not bad at all. Needs a good clean up, everything to come off and check through, maybe touch up a couple of little things. There's a tiny bit of cracking on the lacquer around here where it's taken a knock. It breaks the lacquer, but it hasn't broken anything else, and it doesn't go around the full width anyway. Like I say, little bits here which I'll paint with some. I've got some cherry, vintage cherry lacquer. I'll just touch those up. No harm in just covering them up. But yeah, lighter than usual, easy to play, thicker neck, convincing, nice tones between the three different positions on the two pickups. Tuners holding up so far, nothing special, standard kind of Chinese sealed tuners, nothing remarkable, nothing bad at all. So all in all, not bad at all for a budget Les Paul copy, and the interesting bit being that it's lighter than the usual ones. It doesn't suffer from the dreadful flatness of the Epiphone sort of special style things. This one has a bit of contouring to it, which adds something. I'm also obviously going to do fret leveling and clean up the frets, and with that bring the action down a little bit, but it's not at all bad already. So somebody's set this one up fairly well somewhere in the past. I doubt very much it would have come from the factory or the shop like that. It's been done, so well taken care of. So actually a nice guitar. I'm impressed really. In some ways I kind of like it better than the V100s. Sorry for saying that. The thing about the V100s is I think they're overhyped. Sorry about this, anyone who's a complete fan. Yeah, I'm finding them a bit soulless. Everybody says they're fantastic. My Rally Les Paul copy has got some great character, I think, but I find the V100s just a tad soulless for my liking. So looking under the bright lights, what do we got? Well, we've got, I think these are 10s that are on here. I'm not 100% sure. I'll just do a quick check. I don't know if I can keep this on long enough. Come on, where is the string gone? Well, actually it could even be heavier than that, but I doubt it. Yeah, they're 10s. So I'll put 10s back on it because it feels quite nice as it is. So quick look through, what have we got? We've got clearly a well played guitar. It's got flattened frets, been flattened through use. I think looking at it, it's quite consistent all the way across. Somebody may have gone over it with a sandpaper or something, but I think it's probably more just through use. Been played well, been loved and looked after pretty well over however many years it is, because if it's pre-Wilkinson it's a fair few years old now. Rosewood fingerboard, these sort of, what do they call them, inlays, standard stuff. Bound fingerboard. The fingerboard is not exactly cracking, but you can see where the fret ends almost poke through, and there are a few other little tiny cracks either side of it, so it's showing its age, but everything works well. The action is pretty good over the first fret. It's a tiny bit inconsistent, but it's pretty good. Somebody's chosen to put it that low. We've got some groove wear as well in this, but it seems to have been played all over the neck. This hardware, standard Chinese looking stuff. It's kind of nicely yellowed plastic, and the treble and rhythm has worn off there, so it's sort of another indicator of its age. In terms of neck relief, what's it got? Virtually none. I think somebody's deliberately flattened that out completely, so we've we can add a bit more back into it, but it plays quite nice at the moment, but I doubt we'll get any lower action settings because it's probably been set as low as it will go. Intonation looks like it's set already, so somebody's played and enjoyed this guitar for many years, possibly, or very likely the guy I bought it off. It's a more garish sort of Japanese. I don't know why it makes me think of Japanese sunbursts. Looks a bit like the sort of sunburst on my Antoria, which isn't Japanese anyway. But so it's not the cherry sunburst of the later V100s, but it has a nice kind of. It's very distinct. It's sort of, yeah, it's vintage Antoria style. That's what it's making me think of. But I think it's got character, and the fact that it's not your run-of-the-mill V100, I quite like that. And as I say, you heard it there. No, I can't find any fault with how it sounds. So what I would want to do, and I'll just say this once at the start of this video, in view of some unfriendly and unsupportive, so I say some, an unfriendly and unsupportive contributor recently who feels that everything I'm doing is complete trash and wrong. You know, we're all entitled to our points of view, and that's an absolute fact. You know, isn't it the whole point about fighting against IS, about in part trying to preserve a kind of culture and a civilization in which we all have the right to have our opinion and express it without being persecuted? But what I don't think is okay is to share it in a critical and destructive way with the intent of putting someone down. So that's what I personally disagree with. So in light of that critical contribution, I think it's really important for me to say that what I'm doing here works. In the year I've been doing this, I've got something like 1150 YouTube subscribers without doing any work to promote it or anything like that. I've got about 150 plus customers over that period, satisfied customers. I've got great eBay feedback, list as long as your arm, really great feedback. I've made one or two mistakes and I've sorted it out with customers and hopefully left them very confident that their satisfaction is my principal aim. But it's clear that from all that great feedback and happy customers who I see face to face and come, sit in my front room and play their new guitars or whatever, or their guitars that they've struggled with for years but then I've set up for them, it's clear to me, the evidence to me is that it works. So please forgive me if you have a different view, but I don't take that view as seriously as you'd like me to, right? Because what I'm doing works. I see evidence of it working, which you may not see, and so you're entitled to think it's wrong or whatever, but I just request that if you do, just start from a position of being respectful and share it, and maybe you'll learn something, maybe I'll learn something. That's all I want to say on that subject. But I will delete abusive stuff because it doesn't help me or anyone else. Okay, so here's what I do. I'm going to crank a little bit of relief into this neck because it has none, and for me it needs to go a little bit anti-clockwise to counter the pull. Oh, hang on, is this a... Okay, this is not... Ooh. Okay, I have to do this with a socket. That's interesting. So, okay, there might be a little pause here where I go searching for the kind of tool that will blasted well do this. And I have to say, I don't think it is immediately to hand. And the next question is, where the hell did I tidy them all away? Yep, I'm going to need a socket. Could it be this one? Possibly. I think I might have one ready. I may have been smart enough to have one standing by. I have a feeling that I may possibly credit myself with that much brains. Oh yes. Oh, result. It's not often that happens, I can tell you. So counterclockwise, please, Captain, if it will go. Stiff. So it's being cranked up to its maximum flatness. So I'm just slacking it off a little bit, and that's going to introduce a bit of, yeah, a little bit of play now, a little bit of relief. And I'll leave it at that. I don't want to do any more, but I'll keep it handy in case it settles down to more than I want, then I can go the other way. So a little bit of relief in the neck, and the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set the playing action down this end at the target that I want for it. Yea, verily, if I could but find the bit that doth the measuringness, which is here. So I like to aim for, if possible, around about 1.5 millimeters. Why do I choose the same figure each time? Because I sort of set up the same basic parameters each time. So it's an electric guitar, it's a Les Paul copy. Am I putting the same amount of relief into the neck as usual? Yes. Am I putting the same string height over the first fret as usual? Yes. Am I going for the same action measured wherever you want to measure it? It's up to you, but I tend to measure it at the end here. Am I aiming for the same kind of action each time on this similar kind of guitar? Yes. Why do I do that? Because everybody who's brought me a guitar or come to buy one has always said, I want the lowest playing action I can get, please. Not the highest, or could you crank it up so it's higher at the 12th fret or whatever. They always want, in my experience, most people want, if possible, lower playing action than they've got. So that's what I'm aiming for here as my start positioning. Let's have a look. Down a little bit. Okay, nice and low. Obviously that changes the tuning, which I will take a quick note off this one. And I'll just quickly relatively tune. So that's the notional action I'm aiming for, and the question here now is, does everything play? No, it doesn't. That's why it was set the way it was. It's usually the case. Any lower than it was set, that's what happens. So that is the action we want, but as you can see, the neck, the frets, the condition of the neck and the frets, well actually the neck's okay, but the condition of the frets is such that it doesn't permit that. Very low over the first fret, at different values I'm afraid. That first one is too low, probably. We could either, probably just need to build it up slightly with a bit of bone and super glue, which will just make it easy for me to reset it. But for now, I'm going to wait to do that. I'll wait till the strings are off and then I'll mask it off so I can do that. For now, I'm going to take these settings as good. They'll do for now. Particularly, normally I'd just tweak each one of them, but because I've got to build up this first one. But now let me see if it's just this one I have to build up. I could probably get away with doing it there and then. Let me check the other ones. The other ones I'm hoping will be closer to 0.3 of a millimeter. Yeah, they're all just on 0.3, so we want to get this one back up to 0.3. So for ease of thingamajig, I'm going to get some masking tape out. It's not, I've found it's not always a foolproof way of doing things, because for some reason, well, not for some reason, if you use super glue, thin super glue, masking tape tends to, it lets the super glue wick underneath it, and it's almost impossible to stop it. So there's always often a moment where you've got to panic because there's super glue gone onto the fingerboard. The masking tape sort of has a capillary action, sort of, which sucks the super glue under there no matter how much you don't want it to go under. So I always do my best to sort of flatten it down to the paper to the deck with no air gaps as much as possible, hence this little rubbery thing, and then right in the corner with something flat and getting close. But you can do the best you can do, but it won't always fix the problem or stop it. So I'm just going to cover all sides of it where glue will be and press it as flat as I can. A bit on the back edge here, and then what I'll do is I'll drop some bone dust into the slot, and followed by chucking some very, very runny super glue on top of it, and the aim of that is to then just create a sort of cement at the bottom. I don't need to fill the whole thing up, it doesn't matter if it does, because I can again cut away with the nut slots. I don't want to, I'm not going to knock off this nut and put a new one on, because all that's going to do is going to add another 10 quid or so to the cost of the guitar. And to be honest, this is a well set up budget guitar. I'm not, in this case, I'm not trying to rebuild this guitar to a concourse condition. So I'm taking some bone dust, which I've saved from other guitars or other work I've done. In fact, this was saved from, or collected from, cutting down on the nut that I built from scratch for an oversized extra wide 6-string guitar I made for somebody the other day. Okay, so very carefully I've put some extra, or some bone dust into this gap, and now what I'm doing is I'm going to, hopefully, this is hard stuff to work with because it either clags itself up all the time or breaks the cap like this, in which case more air gets in. But I've got this ultra runny stuff, and it tries to go everywhere other than where you want it usually. That's my experience. So in this case it's telling me it's gone and filled up the end. See if I can get it to run again. Bear with me a second. Is it coming out the end? Is it hell? So this little tube arrangement I think has got stuck at the end, so I'm going to make a cut on there. Just keep my fingers crossed. It's going to come out the end. Please do it. Testing away from the workpiece. Yes, it's sort of coming out the end as well as halfway down. Blimey. Well, if we go directly on top, that missed completely. There you are, blobbed it on. Like I said, very difficult to control. Some of that's now fallen onto the paper. I just have to trust that the paper is going to do its job as good as it can be. If not, when the strings are off a bit later, I'll take some very fine sandpaper and we'll get it back to a nice clean rosewood if we have to do it that way. But okay, so that's given me a temporary or a cement fill, like a dentist fill. I'm going to get the low E file and I'm going to blow away with my fresh air wherever that's gone. Blow away any residual dust I can. Also hopefully help dry this off a bit. Okay, so I'm just going to see how it's sitting at the moment. Right, so I'm going to then unhook the E string, which I need from this point on, which is easier said than done, because I've got masking tape around it. Come on. One more guitar coming this week, should be this week, and that's a Wesley Super Strat. I'm kind of interested about that one because I've had Wesleys before. They're very underrated in my view. Now I've got a piece of masking tape that won't come off. Yes, it will. Yeah, quite underrated, but I've had one before and I was so surprised, pleasantly surprised by the one I had, that it's made me, as with all good things, made me decide to get another one in whenever the chance arose. So I'm just going to bring this up to tension again. And then I'll measure the height, and at the moment it's way above, so I can keep on cutting away. So the reason I want to get this part of it right first is I want to do this before I start the process of doing any fret leveling. So I want to get those three things the way I want them, which is the nut, the bridge and the neck relief in combination, so that it looks and feels like a guitar with the playing setup that I would like. And as I said, the one part of that equation that doesn't want to play at the moment is obviously the condition of the frets. So we've got the action set in the way we would ideally want it, but what we don't have is the cooperation of the fretboard or the frets underneath, because they are undoubtedly, there's going to be some quite monumentally uneven ones under there, hence, or illustrated or suggested by the choking or dead notes that we heard a little bit earlier on. So whereas most people, most guitars, budget second-hand guitars, whatever, that you'll go to someone's house and play, will be the playing action will be set or dictated by the limitations of the frets. So the owner will have tried to get a nice low action, run into buzzing and choking, backed off and called it quits at that point. So in that way the guitar neck tells you what you can do. This way we're telling the guitar neck what we want first, and then finding where the neck kind of reacts badly to that, and then the idea is from here to go and bend the neck, or not bend it, but adjust the frets to make it bend to our will, shall we say. Okay, I'm happy with that for now. I'm not going to worry about that thing. I'll deal with any super glue issues there a bit later on. But now we've got this E string back up out of its too low slot, using the super glue and bone. You can use super glue and bicarbonate of soda. It's just a white powder. You could use super glue and cocaine if you had any knocking about. If you had enough knocking about, shall I say. Anyway, jokes aside. So what am I going to do now? Well, I'm going to take a tool that I use a lot now, which has been giving great results. And I call it the banana for various personal reasons that I won't go into, other than the obvious one that it bends into a shape. Because why? It's a truss rod, with some sandpaper on it. So the banana truss rod bends and deforms to match the shape of the neck that I'm working on. Now with the strings under tension and with some relief in the neck, which I'll check again now, it's not a huge amount, but we've got enough. With some bend in the neck, we want to level the frets, but we want to do it with the bend in the neck and the strings on, with everything being the way it is when we play it. Why do we do that? Because I learned a while back, when you level it, well, you could straighten the neck out and level it with a flat file, and that gives you a nice relatively level set of frets, and it's very effective, and I did that for many months and got loads of great results. But if you can find a way to do it with the guitar fully strung, with a neck with some relief in it the way it is when you play it, then to be able to level the frets in that position is a little bit more accurate, because it takes into account what happens to the neck not only when it's physically bent, but when it's under compression. And the frets behave slightly differently with the wood under compression, so they sit slightly differently than they would when they're laying flat out levelled passively. Anyway, all that it means is if I can do this with the neck curved and in playing configuration, it means I can achieve a fraction more accuracy, which means a tad more lower action or a tad cleaner sounding notes, theoretically. So how do I do it? Well, I have to bend this tool to my will to follow the curve of the neck, and to do that I use a very simple principle, which is these three little feet. Now this was I came across how to do this thanks to a guy who has made a tool which he sells it from Japan, and it's called the katana tool, and I bought one and I thought it was absolutely fantastic. However, despite praising it to the skies, he didn't like the way I described it in my videos and the way I used it, so kind of made a bit of a fuss, and the result was it just became far too unpleasant for me to continue using it. So now I use a homemade version which does the job for me just as well, despite I've heard that on his promotional stuff he says that it's nonsense. I've got very satisfied customers to attest to that being true. Anyway, you can do this yourself, or you can buy the tool. His tool is more convenient in some ways than this. It's a little bit easier to use, and I recommend it. I think it's great. Just don't be like me, don't have an opinion and don't have your own YouTube channel, because my experience is that this individual gets very easily offended with what you say, even if you're promoting it positively. Okay, so before I do anything else, I'm going to take my permanent marker and, with a bit of faff, because I have the string still on, I'm going to just take a bit of time to go and mark the tops of each one of these frets. And I'm doing this so that I'll be able to see straight away when I'm starting to level the frets which ones are the high ones and which ones are the low ones. Because one of the things about relative fret level, because all of this is just relative, the guitar works on the basis that when you hold down a note, that you've got to have a gap. It obviously sits on the top of the fret that you're holding it down just behind, and it will only work if the following fret, there is a clearance between that fret and the string. Otherwise it wouldn't play, and when these notes are choked off because of a high fret, that's what's happening. You're holding the string down on a certain fret, and then instead of there being a gap to allow the string to resonate and ring out, a fret somewhere in the ahead of you, probably usually very close, but somewhere ahead of you, a fret is high relatively to the one you're fretting on, and as a result it gets in the way and plays the note you don't want. It doesn't let the note you've chosen ring out cleanly. So you've got to remember that when you're dealing with frets and the strings, the dimensions involved are tiny, and they're necessarily tiny. It's intended to be tiny, fractions of a millimetre in certain cases. But the idea is you have to make sure that these frets relative to each other are level, so that wherever you're fretting a string, whichever fret you're pressing a string against, you should be that the gaps between that fretted string and the next top of the next fret is a certain amount, enough to allow it to ring, and that the gap increases at a steady and progressive rate for every fret thereafter up the fingerboard. And if you can make your frets level relative to each other, then you'll get you'll be able to set a really low action to wherever you want it, basically, and still get clean playing notes. And when you can set the frets low, it's not just because everyone loves them low and it's some sort of rock and roll thing. It isn't. It's that they're easy to play for most beginners and so on, and it feels more satisfying for most people, not all. So it is about relative levelness, okay? And with this neck slightly curved, and with this tool now curved to match that curve, you may not be able to see it, but if you could see look down it like I can, you can see that there is a very slight curve in this truss rod, and it's got 220 grit sandpaper, sorry, 400 grit sandpaper on the other side. And that's going to be my cutting surface. And I haven't got a thing to demonstrate it, but I suppose a way of demonstrating it is, if that's the curvature of the neck now, I've now got a curved fret leveling tool, and I'm leveling, it's extreme obviously, but I'm leveling relatively level within the same curve, okay? And as long as they match, I'm still, it might as well be, it's the same as having a flat tool working on a flat surface. All I've done is curved the surface and curved the tool, and they match perfectly because of the way I've checked. And as I do each strip on the fretboard, I'm going to recheck the curve to make sure this tool is accurately matching the neck, because from one side of the radius to the other it doesn't stay consistent all the time. So I check at least 3 times across, once at the edge, once in the middle, and once at the other edge. Sometimes if there's a lot of change, variation, I'll do it in every string gap. So what do? Okay, I've double checked, I've marked my frets with black pen. I can now see where, as soon as I start grinding with the sandpaper, I'll know where it's hitting the frets. I know my tool is curved to match the curve in this guitar. I'm just going to slightly slack these first 2 strings off, just so I can move them out of their slots. And I'm going to use the Tune-o-matic bridge to allow me to crank them just to the side, either side, and out of this slot into the next one. And what that gives me is a clear track down the path of these first 2. And this is wide enough that it actually accommodates both strings. So I put that on there, and I'm just holding it in place, and I'm going to start moving it backwards and forwards. You have to have confidence to do this, i.e. to have done it a few times before and know that it works. If you take off too much, you are in trouble and you will have to refret your guitar. If you don't take off enough, you'll probably still find that you're getting choked, buzzing notes at the action that you prefer. So this is it's always a matter of how little can I take off to get the guitar to play the way I want it. Some methods of fret leveling are kind of, I don't know what the word is, bulldozer-ish, and they work perfectly well. And when I say this, I don't mean, I'm going to show you an example, I don't mean this in any derogatory way, but quite literally, if I were to use this approach, and I did for many months, to level frets, and it's a very effective way, I wouldn't be doing it on a curved neck. I'd have the strings off. If it was a bolt-on neck, I'd have the neck off, and I'd use the truss rod to level it flat. Once I'd leveled it flat, this thing is perfectly flat, and it will go straight down the neck in 2 or 3 slices, and in those days I would go until each of the frets had silver on top, that there was no pen left. Once I'd done that, I could guarantee you that those frets were as close to level as they could possibly be. The only downside of that, it's very effective, the only downside of that is that when you have an older guitar, it probably takes off more fret material than is strictly necessary to get the effect you want. The nice thing about doing this version, because the strings are on, it allows me to do a little bit, take some material off the high frets, stop, put the strings back into their slots, as I'm about to do now, and then I can, it's obviously it's not going to be enough yet, but I'm just going to do it as an example. So I'll put the strings back into the slots now, take my fingertips off, and be very careful because they're liable to snap. Doesn't matter, we're going to replace the strings. So the next thing I'll do now is I'm going to just try the notes. Okay, well, we've saved a couple of chokes on the top one, still choking, and still choking on the one, the B string. So it's quite a lot of work yet to do on this one. If the guitar has got so uneven frets that we're not going to get there, then we just have to, ultimately we either have to have a choice between refretting it or accepting that we're not going to get down to the action that we want, and we back off. That situation is only really arrived at when you're dealing with a very old guitar, possibly like this, which has been played for many years. So we've got to be very careful that, you know, we're making sort of decisions all the way along. So I'm just going to recheck this this thing, and I'm going to, I think there's not quite enough curve in that, and I'm just going to add a fraction more. This is a nice stiff tool, so I have to use an Allen key, but the most microscopic adjustment will change the shape of that tool. Hard to describe, it's a matter of feel. When I touch it down on this end first, sorry you probably can't see very well, touch it down on this end first, so that's my kind of fixed lever point, and then I come down and these two are equidistant, and I'm looking for which one touches first, the middle or the end, and I'm going from side to side. If I go from side to side and this middle one doesn't move at all, it means that the neck is more curved than this truss rod, and I curve it some more. If it hits the middle one first, it means the truss rod is too curved because it's touching this one first. If it's touching both at the same time, I'm pretty much in the right region, and I just want it to be, as much as possible, feel like it's both of them. I have a feeling that is almost a fraction too much in the middle. So I'm a smidgen over curved, and I'm going to back off the tiniest amount, and it's so sensitive. I did it previously, that's just on. So I did it previously with a thinner one, like this. And this is an absolutely bog standard truss rod that comes out of something like a Squire Strat that looks like that. Right? Very, very simple. This has got a piece of plastic wrapped around it, but the principle is dead simple. It's a solid rod welded at both ends to a bar, and that you can screw this end in towards the other end of the rod, and it deforms the steel bar because the bar can't go anywhere, and that's what gives you your curve. Now this one was quite useful because it did very, very thin strips. It wasn't quite so useful in that it's a little bit flexible, and so that if you pressed, you deform the shape that you really needed. This one is much more rigid, it's a bit wider, but because it's in a little aluminium box, it's much more rigid, so you can depend on the curve a lot more than you can with the other one. But I guess the point being is you can, whatever bog standard, actually that came out of a Stratocaster Squire, an Affinity, where somebody had tried to hacksaw the neck off and nearly got through the truss rod as well. So I got that from there. This one is an identical design, and it's come out of an Encore Strat neck, which I've been using for spare rosewood and practice years ago on refretting and stuff like that. So it's the gift that keeps on giving. I've got loads of spare useful parts out of it, including the simple truss rod. And by the way, because it's got because it works as a rod, and underneath you've got the flat bar, rod and a bar. The flat bar is perfect because that's the bit that deforms, and that's the bit you can put your self-adhesive sticky tape to. So you can do this, or as I said, you can buy Geezer's really cool looking $140 version. if you think about it, it's a similar thing. He won't like me saying that because whatever he wants to say about it, but I still say it's a great tool. It'll do this job a bit more easily than I'm currently doing it, and possibly even a fraction more accurately, milli fraction. But as I say, I'm nice enough to recommend it, even though he made it impossible for me to use it. There you go. But if you don't have the money, or if you aren't that kind of person, then looky, you can make one for nothing. Actually, I lie, I paid $16 for this truss rod from Stu Mac in America. Okay, so judging by the amount of serious choking going on those notes, we have a major problem on this guitar in terms of the relative fret levels. So I've not picked up a guitar and started to work on it recently where at the kind of action that I want, it has been so completely choked off. So this does make it a little bit unusual, but you know, it's just the nature of the challenge. Nearly there, getting there. Well, that one's opening up. I have to admit this is very, very low, so I'm kind of, the lower I go, the more, what's the word? The lower I go, the more challenging I'm making it for this poor old neck. And the truth is, when I come to play it, I may well raise that action fractionally. But you know that if, I suppose on a luxury, if you get it right with the most testing setting, you know that it's going to play even clearer if you back off fractionally. So if you get it right at this level, it'll be right at a slightly higher setting as well. Okay, so I'm just looking as I go, I'm just keeping this thing in line. I'm putting a little bit of downward pressure, but not a huge amount. It's 400 grit, so it's very, very light sandpaper, but it's clearly doing the biz. It's taking off quite, you know, clearly a good amount of metal off these. Another way you can check while you're going is to get a fret rocker. And this one, I use multitasking tools. I probably won't. Let's take this off. This is a great, if you need something to clean out a slot, take your fret rocker and stick some adhesive sandpaper around it. It makes a really nice, square, flat, dependable thing, and that's really great. So for example, yesterday I was using it to clean out the nut slot on this homemade guitar here, and it was a complete mess because I'd put in a brass nut that just didn't work, and for which I'd already had to cut a bespoke profile shape into the rosewood. So I had to kind of cut a block out, reinstall a replacement insert, and then cut a new slot. And this, if you don't have any expensive nut slot cutting tools, this can really help you get a flat bottomed slot and a straight edge slot. If you just use this really carefully, you can use it judiciously to get a really, really cleaner slot than you could get probably using any hand chisels or other kinds of files. Actually, it's really good. Anyway, back to what I'm using it for. I'm using it for a level checker. So look at that, some major unevennesses still going on all over this thing. This will have been like this from the beginning. The unevenness is because of the way the frets have been seated in back in the factory, and the clicking tells me there's just a relative unevenness. Now we're starting to iron them out here, but that is substantial there. So this one is way higher than probably both of those, and similar with these. So this is telling me important stuff. It's telling me that these here are significantly high, and there's still some problems. So all I'm bothered about is, at this stage, will I have enough material to you know, fret notes nicely when I'm done? And it still has enough because the frets are still in fairly good enough shape. Like I said, if they weren't, my options are to give up and accept the action that it came with, which I have to say it wasn't too bad, or I say, okay, I'm going to refret this guitar, and I'm going to basically take it back to a blank slate in terms of levels of frets, and I'll put the frets in this time, and I'll do my best to make sure they're even and won't have this problem. And with a press like this behind me, I have to say I've got pretty good results most of the time. Certainly with certainly with the force that you can exert with that kind of press, it really helps you to get the frets in fairly consistently. Where the frets sit once they're put in often depends on what's inside the slot as well. So you might give them all the same squeeze, but if there's sort of crap inside this one, it will sit really high, hence the amount of material that's coming off. The point is once they're in place, it doesn't matter how or why they came to be so bad. The point is they won't play very well until you do whatever it takes to level them out. Okay, so looking at my fret leveling thing, still getting some rocking. Not much up here now. It's starting to level out a little bit, but there's still minor little bits up here. But this is doing its work. Coming back down here, a little bit of clicking still down here. Bit too much for my liking. So it's getting there, but it's taking quite a substantial amount of material off some of the frets. But we won't get it to play at a nice low action unless we do. So the way I see it is I'll give it a go, as long as it's within the bounds of playability. I'll keep going until we get it right, and then if I have to, we'll back off just a fraction. What I'm going to do is just give it a quick play test now and see where we are. You know, as I said, you could level the whole neck and just scrape the whole lot in one go, and in a way it's less worrying this, because it just does it and then you look at what you're left with at the end. But that's quite worrying, because you may not have control. You may suddenly reach a point where it's unplayable. So this little buzz here tells us that we've got one here that's upsetting this one, and it's probably because this one's low, which makes this one high. Okay, I'm going to, in the interest of not taking too much material, I'm going to back off a half turn and just check what we've got in terms of action. I don't want to go too high. That's 1.6. I'm going to go a little bit lower than that, so let's go to the 1.5, which is where I tend to aim for. Let's hear how it sounds now. Almost playable. Almost playable. It's funny. It's like watching children grow up very slowly. If you remember back, even if you whiz back in this video to the first bit, those notes here were completely choked. So what we've done so far is to unchoke those notes, so that we now are at least able to make this play at a playing action that is acceptable. What is interesting is I can really see the frets here that are miles high set against the ones that are miles low, and there is quite a big difference between all of these. It's quite a shocking difference, actually. Just beginning to touch everything now, but you know, there are one or two like this which are just way low than everything else. But I would say at this point now we've got playability for the action we want out of these, and I'm going to use that as my benchmark for the rest of the neck, hoping that perhaps all the rest won't be quite as bad. So I'm just going to tune, if I can. What looks scary at this point is the width of some of these frets now, because of the amount of material that's had to come off. It looks really horrendous. It's hard to believe that I've had to scrape this down to a flat fret, or with a flat spot, which now not even isn't not only isn't it even curved, the flat spot, the overall flat spot on this fret here, it measures an astonishing, I reckon, 1.6 millimeters wide. So the one next to it wasn't even touched by the sandpaper. The one after it was. So you can tell that these two frets are so much higher than that one that it allows these to be shaved to a flat spot of 1.6 millimeters without even getting near this. So I mean, I know I'm labouring the point, but I think it is. If you want to imagine how guitars come out of factories, and people, maybe the kind-hearted amongst us, don't really want to imagine that these things can be that bad. But on that guitar, we have got a fret here that hasn't seen even the light of day from the file, and then we've got one here that is now approaching the same height as it, with a flat spot on it, and one next door with a huge flat spot on it, right? And we're still not even down to the level of that middle one, so the level is clear above the middle one. That's a really bad drawing, but you know what I mean. So that's what we've got to, just by doing what we do. Now that begins to approach the playability, but can you imagine where it was before? With the tops of these frets on, which we no longer have, it indicates an actual unlevelness. Keep it straight, boy. There's a sort of relative unlevelness of these frets that is now that big, right? And it's that means that when you were fretting this note here, so if I just take that away, made the point, but if you were now, imagine yourself fretting around this guitar, and you go, okay, I'm going to put my big finger on there, that's my finger, don't know, and so you're pressing way down onto there, boink, actually your finger isn't there, the finger's pressing down there, isn't it? There's your big finger with the fingernail. You're fretting on that one there. Because this is so high, this actually wants to go off at a very, very small angle, but it's hitting the top of this one by miles because it's so huge. So an ultra low fret here makes that one high, even if, in fact, these two could be actually normal. If this is ultra low, it makes those two relatively high, and the point is within a fretboard, it's your low frets that dictate what happen. They create relative high frets. Relative high frets choke out notes, but it's always down to these fellas they're the culprits. And if you can't, your decision all the way is if you can't get rid of, or you can't reduce that discrepancy between the highs and the lows without taking so much away that it's unplayable, then you're faced with the practical choice of refretting or leaving it as it is. Okay, so it's a sort of dynamic, ongoing decision. There's no one answer when you make that decision for yourself. So I'm just using experience of knowing how long it's going to take to reshape those flat ones now to make them playable again, and whether or not there's enough overall to leave me with a guitar that feels like something under the fingers. Luckily, this started with chunky enough. These are jumbo frets to begin with, so there's enough in there for me to do that. Okay, so I've done my first strip. Is it playing? Is it tuned? Yep. Then I'm going to go to the middle now, and I'm going to stick my marker feet down the middle. I'm just going to again use the truss rod to measure, or just to gauge whether they're equidistant or not, and they're miles off. What am I like? Let's check that again. I need them. I can't make them. I can't make this longer than the actual truss rod itself. If I do, then I won't be able to place it on it. So, can I reach it? Yes. So, start with my left hand anchor point. Go to this, and I need to add some curvature into this. It's hitting the end one only. So it's telling me that the curve of the neck is changing slightly across the radius. So I bend the truss rod a certain amount more, and it's still clearing the middle one, so I'm going to bend it even more. And it's still clearing the middle one, so I'm going to bend it even more. This is quite a big change. Basically, now it's touching both and it's moving the middle one when I go from side to side. It still feels like it's probably... You can even hear it. You can hear when... I think that's about on. You can hear when it... hear and feel when it's touching both almost equally. And that's what you're aiming for. It's not ultra scientific. It's touch and feel. Touchy-feely even. So, I've done the same thing. I've cleared the track, got my curved tool, and I drop it into there, and away we go. And again, it's continuing to shine the frets that I expect it to shine straight away, the ones that are obviously clearly high overall and relative to the ones either side of them, and the low ones still standing out quite distinctly from the crowd. And again, although the temptation is to sort of just keep going and assume that the pattern of lowness and highness, Your Highness, extends all the way across the fretboard, I resist the temptation to do that and test its playability. That's the only way that we're going to achieve what we want and take the least amount of metal away. It's test the playability. This isn't coming out, why not? Come along. There you go. If it's playable, we stop. So we're on the next two strings. A little bit more to do. A little bit more to do, but not nearly as much hard work as the first two. And often you can find, I have found, that the fret ends can often be the worst seated, and they leave you with the most unevenness and the most material to remove. So when you're leveling frets, you often will expect the pattern of shiny silver where you're cutting away to continue across the neck, but it isn't always exclusive. It doesn't always follow, because it does change the neck. The way the frets are seated changes, can change, and so you can find where it starts out cutting on one fret, it stops. Like for example, this one is high in the middle but not at the ends. This one's high all the way across, and this one's high at the end but not in the middle. So it's different patterns all the way. I always like to tune up to roughly playing pitch, just so I can I'm almost there. That one is almost there as well, just a fraction more. So that's the beauty of doing it this way, is you stop when you don't need to go any further. You don't go any further than you need. And that way you can take as relatively as little as you have to off the frets. You don't want to take more than you need to. It's wasteful, and of course it, relatively speaking, shortens the playing life of the guitar. In you sacrifice a bit of the guitar lifespan for level frets and a decent action. You may or may not have seen it months ago, but when I started doing this, I kept a fret leaderboard of shame, just for my interest and information to learn. A bit like what's that? Brum brum. top gear. But the reason I started doing it was because I couldn't quite believe that all guitars had uneven frets. I kind of had an assumption that a mechanical mass production process would, by this time in history, know how to put frets into freshly cut slots in a way in which they were almost microscopically level to begin with. But the fret leaderboard of shame, I tested the next 100 or so guitar, or whatever, 50 odd guitars that came through, demonstrated that every guitar came through with uneven frets, more or less, some more, some less, and some more severely uneven than others. But nothing predicted whether they would or wouldn't. So expensive guitars, Gibsons came through with as many uneven frets as budget guitars. Fender custom shop Telecaster full of uneven frets. So the fret leaderboard of shame just showed me that it was universal. Within reason, all or virtually all guitars have uneven frets. And then the question then comes, why isn't it done better? Why can't the manufacturing process do this better? And then why do people settle for it if it means you have to settle for a high action? A little tiny bit more. Yeah, just wondering, why is it? And I suppose it's one of those things that there's a way of doing it that becomes the way, and it gets stuck being the way. And I don't know, maybe there's some commercial reality in there that maybe the manufacturers go, well, are people buying our guitars? Yes. So why would we change it? Why would we spend money changing the manufacturing process or the way we do things if people are still buying them? Is it good enough? Well, yes, people buy guitars off the shelf every day of the week and they're totally happy with them, and everybody's happy and the money rolls into the bank. So maybe that's it. Anyway, I found that really revealing, and of course what it also showed is that to get it so it isn't like that, either takes this much manual work, or you have to put it into whatever this fabulous technology that people talk about is, what do they call it? Plec machine people talk about, which seems to be the only other way of getting level frets. And apparently the most expensive Gibsons go through that machine, or some Gibsons go through that machine, they say. I'm just going to double check the curvature on here. I'm not going to assume it's the same. Anyway, so it's it obviously takes some time and effort, depending on whichever way you do it. Right, this is slightly over in the middle now. It takes some time and effort to do it, and I guess there's some sort of financial reason why it's not easy to do. Why would you chuck loads of money at getting this level of precision if it's not needed? But it's interesting, you could say it's not needed, but everyone I've ever given a guitar to that I've leveled the frets and set it up with a playing action that it then can plays really well with, everybody has been really excited and happy with that. So, well, how isn't it needed or wanted? It seems to be go down a storm when you do take care of it. But I guess nobody's going to do that extra work if people are still prepared to buy it anyway. So we shall see. Anyway, so we're on to the last stretch of the neck here, and hopefully, I'm hoping this won't take that much to get right. We've got it sort of stopped It's taken some from up here and here, the high spots that we expect. So I'm going to try out how it plays early on this one, because again, I don't want to assume that it goes all the way across if it doesn't. Nope, more needed. I've lost all my fingernails through sanding recently, which makes it very difficult to pull strings out of the way. Okay, a little bit more work on here. Sorry if this is boring, but the great thing about YouTube is you can always hit that little fast forward button, or even the back one page button, and watch something far more interesting, like the Great British Bake Off. Or the speeches of David Cameron, something like that. Okay, quite a interesting, yeah. Wow. Okay, I'll try it again. I have this feeling I'll still be going on this one for a short while yet. Come on. So these strings will go in the bin once I've got this stage done. So it doesn't really matter how badly I treat them at the moment. Getting there, still a little bit up here. So we've been running for what, about an hour and a half or something just on this bit, so you can see how much it takes to do it. There's no quick way. And you know, it's not because this is an old guitar, it's because it is any other guitar. All guitars, most guitars have this. You know, even a new, brand new guitar that I get through, I'll do this to it. And I may find as many uneven frets as this, and sometimes as significantly uneven as this as well. And there are some exceptions where you can be fairly confident, certainly out of the ones that I've come across. So for example, I would absolutely not expect to find this amount of uneven frets in a Squier Classic Vibe Strat or a Telecaster, for example. So they seem to be really, really well put together. So it has to do something to do with the quality of construction. Nearly, very nearly, one more run on this and then I'm going to call it quits and see where we go from there. Nice thing is, once we've done this, we can then take the strings off and go into the process of cleaning everything up, including taking everything off that can be taken off to allow us to give it a really good all-round clean up. And that's such a nice part of making the guitar feel freshened up, particularly when we've given the frets a bit of a lease of life. Okay, I'm going to halt there and have the faith that it's pretty much on where we want it to be. And if we have to raise it up a fraction of a millimetre, then I will. I'll stop at that. Right, so I'm also wiping my hands of all that metal dust that's come off on my fingers from doing this. Okay, so next stage in this, we have got some seriously flattened frets, as you know. We've got a neck with the relief set according to the truss rod. We've got an action down here that's fixed, we've chosen, and we've headed, or we've gone towards it. Now I'm going to take the strings off, and the next part of the process will be to chuck them away because we won't need them again. And then I'm going to take care of cleaning the neck, all the components, probably take the tuners off, probably do a few little repairs to the headstock and so on. So I'll do those off camera because it's just slow and boring, but I'll let you know that's what I'm doing. Then I will come back and mask off the fingerboard and prepare to do the next 2/3 of the fret leveling process. This was just 1/3, and you see how long it's taken. I'm going to cut these strings and bin them because I've got plenty of spare sets to draw on. Hellfire, what time is it? I'm supposed to be rehearsing tonight. 14:57, nearly 3 o'clock. It's almost dark outside. I better I'll get some cleaning up done, and then I'm going to call quits on this, and I'm going to go and practice some songs because I haven't since last time. Bad boy. Right, off comes the stop bar. It's very square around the back end. That's funny, isn't it? How a square manufactured bar goes onto a round post. I mean, it works, but sort of slightly surprising. There's no reason, it doesn't move anywhere, so there's no reason why it needs to be round. It just doesn't look right. Okay, off with these old strings. Nice thing is having taken these strings off, and they're 10s, remember, the neck will now be relaxing into a different profile, but once we put it, restring it again, it will go back to the profile or the shape it had when we did the fret leveling. So that relative levelness will come back once we restring it with the same grade or gauge of strings. So this is a more of a fun bit now, which is sort of touch-ups and clean-ups. You can take things off. I don't need to preserve the action in the bridge, for example, because I know what I'm going to go back to, and I'll probably tweak it a little bit when I restring the guitar. I'm going to take all these bits off because I want to give the whole of the body as much of a clean over as I can, because it's very dusty and grubby. And I'll take the cur knobs off using the Scott Grove approved method called putting your little raggy bit under there and pulling up. Gee whiz, what are they attached these with? Super glue or something? Hellfire, that didn't want to come off. Again, gives me a chance to clean the surface under there. It's not very nice when you can't get near to the pots because you can't get that area very well cleaned. Jesus, these must be glued on. That is quite some effort. Guess who's going under around the back of the bench? Don't worry, there's a few things around there I've got to pick up anyway. Okay, and then a quick undo of these bits, just to give me access. Again, you know, I can clean up the pick guard, I can get underneath here, so it looks a lot nicer when we put it back on. Personally, I prefer to live without pick guards anyway, but that's just my own personal taste. That is quite a long screw to go in there. Let's take this off. A little bit of super glue that's gone running, but actually not too much, so I can get that off with a bit of elbow grease. worry about that later. On this side I'm just going to have a look under here, make sure there are no dodgy looking connections, just for the sake of it, but I doubt there are. It seems to be working fine with no intermittent problems. But it's always nice to have a poke under the hood, see what's there. And then I'll get a little container and put all these bits in. I'm going to replace that one because that's slightly worn out. Okay. Again, we can clean these easily. That's all looking good. Very simple, straightforward, everything as you'd expect. Good old-fashioned, no shielding, that kind of thing, but all working nicely. And like I say, for the sake of doing some touch-ups, we'll also take off the tuners as well, so that just give everything a thorough clean. I'm counting the bits into here 2 by 2, so that 3, so I know I've got everything, minus a knob that is on the floor. Tuners. So far, nothing obviously wrong with these tuners that strikes me. You may need, that one needs a little tightening here, but perfectly workable, usable tuners. So when I take these off, these are the kind that undo on the front and the screw on the back. I just slack this bit off first so it's just loose, and then I'll go around the back and undo the screw. And get it out. I've got millions of these, so I can afford to throw them all on the floor if I want. And then you can take the other side off by hand and just stick them together. And I'll even clean these up so that they look really as good as possible when we put them back on. That's, you know, why not? Why not make it look as refreshed and reloved as you can make it? That's my take. The colours I've got here, this is not really a vintage cherry, it's more of it's a red and it's a yellow. So if I do cover up with anything, I don't really think I'll be matching the colours very well, so I'll have a look. If it's doable, I'll do it if it looks better than wood, but if it doesn't, then I'll just be letting it go. Most of the chips are on red, but there are a couple on the yellow which I don't have anything for. Yeah, this one's needs doing up. It's wandered off. Right. So it's still quite a long time to go on this, as you can probably tell. We've got the main jobs: clean up, touch ups if necessary. I'm not too bothered about that, that's not my primary focus. Clean up, touch ups, fret reprofiling, fret polishing, everything back on, restring, intonate. So actually it's not as much as it sounds, but it's not quick. Okay, so there we are. I'm going to take the strap buttons off as well, because I want to just get around there in a clean sweep, and also they're a little bit loose, so in putting them back on I can either try to use a slightly larger screw, or I can pack the hole a little bit if necessary. And I certainly put some felt in there to sort of act as a bit of a spring. But God, this is the second guitar I've taken a completely bent pin out of. that pin. So, okay, so there's my bag of bits out of the way with my truss rod cover with a knob down there on the floor, which I have to remember. I will also put away my banana truss rod fret leveling tool, put away my little feet for another day, and put away my other 2 truss rods there in the department of sneaky truss rods. Put away my bone powder because I don't need that anymore. Doctor. Alright, so clean up time first, followed by getting it ready for finishing off the frets. Not bad, it's a very 70s colour if ever I saw one. In terms of the clean up, a really quick once over to begin with naphtha, which is a pretty completely harmless substance as far as guitar finish goes. No idea what the body finish of this is. I mean, for a mass-produced guitar, I'm assuming it's polyurethane, but who knows, it could be old enough to be, I doubt it, but as I say, the word assume is probably operative word. Assume it's polyurethane. It's got some real grunge built into there, so I have to dig around for a bit. I'm just going to take the sort of immediate surface layers of grime off, so I feel a bit healthier about working on it. And the same with the neck. The neck is going to be particularly filthy, so I'll give it a sort of good scrub while I'm at it. I mean, you know, having put so much effort into making this neck play better, we might as well, you know, also take a bit of time to make it look as good as it can. It'd be a shame to leave lots of finger grime built up into the edges of the frets if we've taken all this time to shine them up and get them clean. You can see the filth coming off. It's quite immense. Yeah, so naphtha is kind of a petroleum ether product. You can buy it, I guess Swan lighter fluid is naphtha, but it's kind of an expensive way to do this kind of cleaning if you're going to do a lot of it. So I went and bought some industrial quantities from eBay, and it was, when I bought it, it was listed as naphtha from the company I bought it from, which was easy enough. But then they stopped making it or selling it. I don't know if it was to do with some government legislation, but either way, naphtha became incredibly difficult to find. So what I found was the nearest, or something that those who are in the know claim is the same thing, and it's called petroleum ether, and it seems to work in many ways the same. The only difference is it evaporates differently. It evaporates a lot when you use it, so you can see it's sort of disappearing as soon as I put it on. The more familiar naphtha that I had been using certainly didn't evaporate. You can feel it because it produces a lot more chill than the other stuff used to do. Okay, so that's the fingerboard scrubbed again, which is much nicer to take away all those years of grime from somebody else's hands. Always watch upwards because I don't have a lot of headroom in here. So a bit of a run round. So it's so much easier not having bits of metal sticking out or pick guards or whatever in the way. So you can really give things a good clean for the sake of taking the component bits off, but also gives you a chance to, you know, have a good look at what you're dealing with as well. If you take everything off, and you can look at things component by component, and it allows you to spot problems as you go. Okay, so there is my one tiny blob of grease sitting in there, which I will kill now. Okay, there we have it, hanging up ready to go. A bit more cleaning around the pickups to do, but I'm going to call it quits there for now. So it's been quite a long old run so far, an hour and a half on this bit, but we will get there with this lovely old vintage Les Paul copy, and yeah, a lot of work on the frets, but that is going to look pretty nice, and it's going to play pretty nice when it's done too. Alright, see you in a bit. So here we are, jumped forward a bit in time. I've masked off the fingerboard of this guitar so that, and the body, so that when I come to do the fret reprofiling now and the polishing of the frets, it's going to keep dust out of the pickups, and it's going to stop any sandpaper going over the top of the pickups, which is going to keep it clean. Now the second and third of the three stages are to take these flattened frets, and on this guitar they are quite significantly flattened in places because these were really uneven frets, but we're going to take them with this concave diamond coated file, which is designed to run across the top and take off the shoulders of the flat spot and gradually round it over into a nice playable dome shape, whilst retaining the original height at the top of the fret. So that's the beauty of this tool. We can reshape the fret but keep the height, and because we know all of these are level now, or we know they're precisely level in fact, it just means that we need to make sure that we leave a little thin strip of marker pen on the top, untouched top of the frets, and if we do that we'll have reshaped them but kept the top surfaces untouched, and if we don't touch the top surfaces we know that we've preserved the relative levelness that we've already achieved in the fret leveling process. Then after that I'm going to smooth or polish all of the frets with a series of progressively finer sandpaper until we end up with a micro mesh set of papers, which will end up giving us a final shine, a playable shine. Okay, so this is going to take some time, and I'm just going to get started on it, show you what I'm doing, and then I'll switch off because otherwise it will just be a lot of well, quite dreary. So make sure I got the right side. Yes, these are jumbo frets. So I start off by just running the file across the fret, and this is one of the really flat ones, and what I can see is it's beginning to create two very shiny edges down the edge of the fret, and basically it's kind of shaving over and coming towards the shaved areas, coming towards the middle, but there's a lot of black pen still showing because there is a lot of flat spot, if you like, to get rid of. So we just have to gently work away with this file at both ends of this fret. Both ends are a little bit more extreme than the middle. So our job is to work away, and as much as we can reduce this flattened spot, which is represented by the black marker pen. Now chances are we might not be able to get absolutely down to the ultra fine 1/10th of a millimetre thin line of marker that I like to get to, and if we don't, well, at least we'll have gone some way to rounding off that fret. But because of the state of these frets, as I said, it's going to take a bit of work to get us to where we want to be, to have this profiled shape. So on a lot of other guitars this process could be almost as quick as a swipe over the top, and we're off to the next one. But this one, almost every one of the frets is going to require as much attention as this one has so far. And I'm rocking the file from side to side to try and kind of get up the sides. So if I just move that out of the way, we're sort of there in the middle, and we're a little bit wider, flat spot still at the edges. But realistically, if we don't have any more fret material left, we may find that that's as good as we're going to get. So it is going to be a little bit of a compromise on some of these frets. You won't see it or feel it when you're playing, but I will know that the fret technically might be a little bit flatter than I would ideally like it to be, but it's not so bad. We're getting just about there with this one. But so that's what's going to happen to every single fret on here. So for my sanity, I'm going to stop the video and put the radio on and carry on doing this in kind of my own time, and then I'll come back and show you the logic of the polishing process, and then we'll go from there and then get back into the more fun part, which is getting the hardware cleaned and back on and getting it strung up and start to really sort of do the precision end of the setup. Okay, right, so here we are ready to do the polishing, and I've took quite a while to profile these frets, but now that's done, what we're going to do is we're going to take it from the scratching, if you like, or the abrasive scratches that came off the tools we've used to fret level it and to reprofile it, and that was 220 grit and 300 grit for the reprofiling. So we're going to go from that kind of scratching down to a 600, then to a 1200, and then to a micro mesh series, which I'm going to use using with a block as well. So to begin with, what I'd like to do is to do it by hand, and I'm going to start with, I'm going to do 4 pieces of this 600, and the thing here is I want to make sure it goes, my fingers go up and over the frets rather than try and flatten them out anymore. So I tend to put a fair downward pressure on the fret, or on the paper, so that my fingers will kind of roll over it and help to re-establish the arch shape. And so as you do this, you'll see that it will start to rub off the black, any of the remaining marker pen, and start to slowly but surely round off the frets, hopefully. And you've got to be very careful that you pay as much attention to all the frets as each other, and often that isn't easy to do, especially near the ends. You tend to miss those out a bit. So if it's a neck that I've taken off, I often spin it round and do the other way, but it's not so easy on a set neck like this, because you can't easily turn the whole guitar around. But as I say, it's all about that sort of downward pressure as opposed to skimming over the top. You want fingers to come up and over the fret, and really does help them get that arch form back. Especially when some occasional on this these frets here, you know, there are some slightly flatter spots still than I would have ideally liked, or you know, than I often get with other guitars. So this one needs even more than ever. Don't want that in the way. This one needs that attention to getting the rounded shape back. There's particularly a couple down here where it took a lot of material to get them levelled. You need to pay good attention to getting these reshaped. So you can see I'm still working on the first bit of paper, and I think I can just about turn this around and come the other way. I'm going to take my time with this because I really want this to work out as a nice playing guitar. And because of the flat spots, sorry about that. Get there. So this goes on and on and on, and I'm going to stop, save you from having to watch it all through with me. This is the place, by the way, if I've refretted the guitar myself, this is a place I might also run down the edges while I'm at it with 600 grit. Not a bad opportunity, even with a guitar I didn't fret, just to go down the edges, and if there are any sharp bits, you can kind of round those off a little bit. It's quite a useful thing to be able to do. Tilting it, sort of leaning it over onto the fret, so I'm not touching the binding or the finish of the guitar. Okay, so there's, like, for example, the first one kind of got to the end of its, nearly to the end of its scratchiness. It gives off quite a bit of dust, so you have to be cautious that you're not going to end up breathing that in. I tend to brush this onto the floor next to make sure that whatever dust is built up, I've got dispensed with. It's not a very good brush actually for that. It's a very good brush for getting stuff off the workbench. There goes a thing. Anyway, I'll still give it a brush down onto the floor. Put that there for use again in a minute, just so it doesn't throw up in my face and end up breathing more of it than I need to. Okay, so I'll carry on going with using my fingers for the next couple of bits of paper, and I can do it this way, and then I'll switch the guitar back into that position and do it. But I'll save you that, and I'll listen to something else in the meantime. So back when this is done and we're ready to take all the masking tape off. Okay, back after the polishing part of things. Lots of hard work, but you can see we've got lots of nice shiny frets now. So we also have quite a bit of dust that's built up on the guitar, so we're going to take that away. Some of it just dusted off manually, and then if we need to we'll take the naphtha to it, and if we leave any sticky masking tape residue behind, then we can also remove that with the naphtha. Good solvent for that. So it's quite a mucky process, and you get ready to get a bit dirty while you're doing it. But of course everything then cleans up beautifully well. And what you get at the end of this process is a treat when you take off your masking tape, and you're left with this lovely reconditioned set of frets, beautifully level and shiny, ready to go. And you know, of course, the whole point of doing it is to give you the option to set the action where you want it, rather than being dictated to by the uneven frets, which in this case were quite a lot. So that's why, this is why I put the little, kind of make sure I have little tabs on the back in between when I'm putting the stuff on, because then it makes it a hell of a lot easier to get off. Still takes a while, but it's worth it, because you're heading towards the next and more fun stage, which is putting the hardware back in, getting the strings on. What I will do is I'll give this guitar sort of a clean with naphtha, and then I'll give it a sort of once over with scratch removal stuff. And somebody said, asked, I don't think it was on YouTube, I keep referring to it as equivalent of teacup, and then somebody said, well, why don't you just use teacup? And I'm not sure, I haven't done any tests. I suppose I use a very small amount of it each time, and so I've sort of bought some stuff specifically for guitars. And you know, the fact is, why am I prepared to pay through the nose? Well, I suppose you do, because you know, at least you don't have to worry about it not working with guitars. So you know, by paying extra, you cut out the need to ever have to do that tests for yourself. But you know, it's the point is, there's no reason why not to test out some good old-fashioned teacup on perhaps a guitar that we're not so bothered about, one that's staying. Now, one of the things to say about this guitar, I noticed there is some grime that's sort of embedded down here, and I want to get it off. It comes off quite easily, but just want to make sure I do get it off, and also lift up the pickups and just get the stuff that's on the side of the pickups. Might as well raise them up and get that grime done while we're at it. Get as much of it off, and then we can, when we wind them back in, they'll just be a lot cleaner. So, very interested now to feel how this plays, because it was quite a very nice feel sounding guitar before, but obviously having removed quite a significant amount of uneven frets will make a difference. So I'm going to go over the whole fretboard first, just to get rid of any of the pen or the dust that I had on there, and then on the headstock as well, front and back. So it's looking nice, and then in between, and then on the side of the pickups themselves, which it's a bit ground in. It's like years of baked in grime, just like the adverts for Ferry Liquid or whatever it was. So if you've got fingernails, get those in. If you don't, get a credit card in there or something. But just be careful that you're not scratching away the paint as you're doing it. This naphtha stuff is pretty good, and it will get rid of the stuff on the side of the pickups very quickly, very effectively. It does evaporate pretty quickly, so you have to either work fast or be prepared to slosh on some more. It's a bit grimy under there. I don't know if it's precursor to rust or something, but it's well baked on dirt. So as I say, slosh some more on, but watch it evaporate at quite a rate. Getting in and out between the buttons, the knobs. One of the things I always want to do is, before we get the thing restrung and ready to go again, is to check that the knobs are in fact well firmly attached, because it's nothing worse than having them spin, and eventually, if they do spin, they'll eventually break the wiring, which will leave you with pickups and pots that don't work. Once they start spinning, they coil the wire around on the inside, and that will just lead to the wire breaking in the end. Okay, so there we have the guitar cleaned up with the neck or the frets levelled and set up. As I say, while I've got the back off and everything's okay, I'm just going to, which way around am I going to do this? The hard way. I'm just going to feel, actually I'll do it the other way. I'll do it the way I intended. Just hold the pots in place, just see if they're done up tight. That's pretty good. Again, you've got to be careful, you're not going to put any extra strain on any solder joints. This one looks like it's spun around already. In fact it has. So I'm going to gently spin it back to where it should be, facing the front, or at least round where it's accessible if you needed to do anything to it, and then do it back up facing that way. And I think they all the rest, and that one's turned around as well. So you can often tell just by looking that these things have gone for a spin, and once you replace them, it's not a very good view, I'm sorry, once you replace them or turn them around the way, I mean when I say the way they should be, it's just to make sure that whatever way they are is easy for you to get to if you need to do any adjustments. And once you reposition the way you want them, you do need to just double check that everything's still connected and nothing's bashing into anything else, but that all looks pretty good. I'll know if it stops playing, but I'll also have a pretty good idea of why it was. Okay, so I'm going to do a little bit of refreshing with my I was going to say poor man's teacup, but it isn't, it's my rich man's teacup. Just brings out an extra little bit of colour and gives the paintwork a tiny refresh, you know. And it doesn't take that long, just whizzing around it once, and it'll take off any little bits that are starting to kind of get stuck and build up grime. So I'll just go all the way around with this, and then next stage I'll do it off camera as well, but I will next thing I'll do is, once I've given this a quick polish over, I'll go through the hardware and give it all a naphtha-ring and a scrub, so that all the knobs and things like the bridge are all free of grime and stuff like that. So again, just so that it all looks a little bit fresher and nicer than we received it. That's the whole plan, is make this thing, make it play and look a bit better than when we got it. And usually the looking better bit really comes down to just cleaning up wherever we can, because it's usually just for want of a clean over the years that these things start to look old and knackered. So as I say, it's pretty straightforward with this stuff. You don't have to spend hours. You can do if you want, but you can revitalise the paintwork with just a once over really, and it gets rid of a fair bit of gunge that starts to build up and take the shine off your guitar. And then obviously once you've done the front side like this, and in between the pots, the back side is quite a bit easier because it's mostly flat bodywork. And then you're going to get something a little bit cleaner than this one as a sort of general clean up. And this one, I think, has got some dust on it, but hey, it's still good enough. So it's not, obviously not a new finish, it's an old guitar, but gives it that extra luster. Get right into the pickups and also into the one in between there. Okay, so spin it over to the other side. Same, and we'll go around the edges as well. So I might as well stay, it just won't take long, so I'll leave it on, because the next stage, oh no, actually I'll stop, because the next stage will be, we're out of goo now, but next stage will be cleaning all the hardware bits. So I'll stop at this point and come back to you when all the hardware is back on and it's ready to restring. So it's time to restring, and here we go. I'm putting 10s on this, and I'm just going to line up the pots and put them back on. And there you go, nice and easy. Possibly. Just making sure all the zeros line up. Lovely. Right. So if you remember right back at the start, we levelled it. It's not long ago actually, it's been longer for me than it has for you. We levelled the frets with the neck in the position we wanted, and the action that we wanted, and as a result, now when we put the strings back on and put it back under tension, I'll get myself the things I need, like choppers, string winders. Yeah, once we put this back under tension, then it's going to go back into that, that configuration, and we should get a very, very nice action out of it. So I'm going to put the string through, all the way through the post, pull it back just about the best part of a fret, and then start winding on. And I want to go over the top of the loose string first, and as it comes back round, I'm holding this under tension. I'm going to then press the remainder under the loose string and let it tighten up. At that point I'll take my clippers and snip off the excess and move to the next one. Again, I'm not putting it under major tension yet, I'll do that in a moment, but I'm just getting them all on, making sure everything's where it should be. And then one of the things that I found most useful to do around after this is to take some time to get all the natural stretch out of the strings, so that you don't undergo frustration of listening to it go out of tune as you're trying to play it. So you can get all of that natural stretchiness or slack out of the string first, and you'll be surprised how much quicker you can get straight onto playing it, and you only need sort of a few minutes of bending notes and playing to get it pretty much so it stays stable after that. What else? Oh yeah, I've tightened up the tuners, the little screws on the end, give them a little tightening because they've grown loose over the years. And so that they're nice and firm now. So this is a fairly simple process. I like this thing of once round over the top and then make the string go under. And if you look at this, if you're buying this guitar and you look at this, you can see how the strings kind of act as a self-locking thing. So you don't have to have locking tuners necessarily. This way of stringing it gives you that bit of extra locking. All of it contributes to having more stable tuning, which is something we all want. What I'll also do, once I've fitted these strings, I'm going to go slack them off, and in each of the slots I'm going to put a little bit of graphite, powdered graphite, so that we can kind of lubricate the string as well. So this way round I'm having to use my left hand, pull it up, get it over the top of the loose string, and then hold it down as it comes back round. And all of this has to be done, well, needs ideally to be done keeping the string under tension. So you develop your own way of doing it, really. And if you can keep it under tension, what you do is you make sure that the string doesn't kind of disappear and get caught on something. There's no real set way of doing it. You just develop your own little ballet to make it work. So we're nearly there. It's always, this side is always a bit weird because you're working backwards. But once you've done it a million times, you sort of get used to it. So I'm just putting that pressure on to make sure the string goes under the loose string. The winding string goes under the loose string, which is where we want it. And then I double check to make sure it's in the slot of that end before I tighten it up, as it is, and away we go. And we're on the final one. I think this, what was nice when I played this guitar, I like the thick neck because it does give you a vintage feel, and I haven't really played loads of vintage Les Pauls, but this kind of neck is how I imagine it would feel, and it certainly, people I've talked to or have heard talking about some of the older vintage guitars, they describe them in that same sort of way. So it's a little different from the usual, so that's why I like it. Okay. Right, everything in place, all nice and slack. I've done the truss rod cover up already because it should just be a matter of string tension now pulling us all back into the right configuration, so there shouldn't be any need, unless we want to change it, there shouldn't be any essential need for altering the truss rod configuration. So now what I'm doing is I'm going over every string and using my thumb and forefingers, although I've got a cut on this one, I'm just pressing out as much of the stretch as I can do, and if you can be bothered to do a bit of it at the top end here as well. So everywhere you've got the string you want to just get a little bit of a stretch going. You get an awful lot out of any single string, and a bit on the other side as well of the bridge. Remember, it's going over a fairly sharp bridge saddle, so you don't want to press too hard at that point. I typically would do this stretching about 3 times before it's completely stable, but it's better to do it 3 times and then, you know, go on stage and play or whatever you're doing, than to hope it will tune up while you're playing, because it won't stay in tune. So I'm just going to get an A out of here, and then tune everything relative. Okay, so I've put the bridge back on too low, so I'm just going to crank it out to give myself a playing action here, which I need. I'll measure it in a minute. Wrong one. I forgot to do something. I forgot to do the bit with the graphite, but I'll do it on the next run. I'll slack them off in a minute. So, just going to stretch again every string, and the tuning will go down again, but this time it won't go down by quite so much, and it will decrease. The amount it goes out of tune will decrease each time you stretch it until it stays stable. This is, I have to say, having stretch in the strings is probably one of the things that leads to people feeling that a guitar goes out of tune all the time most quickly. It's amazing how much stretch you can have left in your strings and for how long if you don't do anything with it. Now, for anything else, I'm going to just put in the graphite now. So I'm going to load up a bit on the blade, lift the string out of the way, drop it in, do the next, slack the next one off, lift it out of the way, drop some graphite in. It doesn't matter if it's messy at this point in time because you can blow away the remainder like that, and then I'll tune up the A again. A bit loud. Oh, do you know what? I'm really stupid. While I'm doing this, I'm going to just do one more thing. Sorry, I completely forgot to oil the fingerboard. So while we're still in the mode of putting lubricant in the slots, which we've got to do anyway, let me just go and oil this fingerboard so we don't play with a dry fingerboard. Sorry, I've got out of sequence somewhere for some reason. Anyway, won't take long. It's quite a nice light rosewood on this fingerboard anyway, so it's not darkening it very much. But it's nice to have that kind of hydrated, fresh look, or reinvigorated look. Okay, and just quickly wipe off the excess because I don't want tons of it on there. Right, now we can go back to where we were. Just get my hands off. Drop these strings back in. And then we can now just drop some straight into the remaining slots here, and we can just do them in one go, and then get back to stretching those. Brush off the graphite there, and then I'm going to do one more stretch, all of them. And then tune them up again. Now, before I go any further, what I'm going to do is just set the action back to where I wanted it to be. At the moment, it's probably not where I want it to be. Millimeters. It's currently just over 1 millimeter. I'm going to wind it out small amount if I can find the screw thread, and then check it again. So just over 1.5 there, and it's just on 1.5 there. I'm going to check the relief in the neck just quickly. More stretching. Okay, so we're heading in the right direction. I'm going to stop for a minute, and what I'm going to do is put on the covers and stuff on the back. I'll test that it works. We shouldn't have any problem with that. It was working before we did anything. I just want to double check before I put the covers on. I'll check, because having tightened up those knobs, it's always possible that some wiring a weak piece of wiring could get dislodged, so don't assume that it works, and there's no point putting it back together again if it's going to just end up having to take the back off and sort it out. Okay, what's not on? Oh, no, it's not switched on. That's a start. Duh. Take the horrible effects off. Working. That's the main thing. I'll leave that for a minute. I'll keep the wire cable up here because I'll use it for doing the intonation and testing it out. Okay, so we're nearly there. Frets leveled, and don't know why there's a little slight amount of buzz here. I'm not sure where that's coming from. I might put some little rubbers in there to stop the buzzing, because that's one of the things that really annoys me on Les Paul tunematic bridges. We get this buzzing out of it. Okay. Alright, so I'll come back to you when it's time. Well, I've put the plastic on and the strap buttons back in, and then we'll be ready to do the intonation, so see you in a minute. So we here arrive at the end with the guitar fully strung. So we have quite a nice, okay sounding bridge pickup, but it's the combination and the neck pickup I really like. That neck's quite nice. Take all the dirt off it and just clean. Jazz chorus, but this is the Brit combo. And then when you go up through the tones, we heard it before at the beginning, but just going up through the tones again, it's still sounding great in the rectified department. Go back a minute. Nice tunes, I mean. Okay, enough of that fiddly widdly. So what have we got to do? We've got the final thing to do, which is the intonation, and for that we're going to need the tuner de la phone. Oh, not that. Here we have it, the iStrobo soft thing, and don't really need to see much other than the tuner, and need a clean tone, and we just need to be able to have the guitar, the tuner pick it up. Now the idea of intonation is getting the length of the string right, and each string has to be a slightly different length for the neck, because of the different characteristics of the string. Sounds great. Yeah, so we're going to, the way we're going to test it is to ping the harmonic on the 12th and then fret it on the 12th. And if the string is the right length for the neck or for the guitar, they should be the same note. So let's tune to the harmonic first. Get as close as we can. That's spot on. Good too. Good enough. Slightly sharp. Slightly sharp. Again, slightly sharp. So there's top three, slightly sharp, which means the string length needs to be longer, and we don't have a lot of room to play with because the intonation adjustments are at their extreme limits, and if we can't get any more adjustment out of it, then what we'll have to do is turn these last three, or these top three thingies, saddles, around. Now the reason I don't personally much like having these things over the screws facing this way, is they make it bloody hard to reach over the top of the pickups. Anyway, I'm just trying to push these all back a little bit, and I'm at the limits of what they can do, so if it's not enough, we shall have to reconsider. Close. That's good, that's on. Just push this B back a fraction if I can, and then we'll call it quits. We're just on the limit of being able to do it, and that's what you get with, for some reason I find it on Les Pauls quite often, the bridge feels like it's slightly out of place on many Les Pauls, and so these bridge saddles have to go all the way back here, and they run out of, or well, it depends. If you find them all the way back here, it tends to be, gives you the feeling the bridge should be further back and they should be somewhere in the middle. If they're all the way at the front, then you feel the bridge should be further back. No, yeah, the other way. Sorry, closer. Good enough. Just on the edge of that G. You can hear that sounds great. Okie dokie. Well, there we go. That's the this vintage Les Paul. Quite a fight with the frets on it, and now it plays pretty well, I think. And it's a bit cleaned up a bit. I put some felt, not exactly perfectly circular shaped. If you can find some more bits of felt that are round, great, put them under there. I've just put the cut out a couple of bits quite crudely because I'm not very good at cutting things out with scissors. But at least it's there cushioning the strap buttons against the body and keeping them tightly in place. So there we go. Pre-Wilkinson vintage Les Paul copy with a kind of very red and orange, red, yellow, red and orange sunburst, levelled frets, refinished frets, and not a bad sound. I like the tone off this, particularly off the neck pickup. I really like that, and all pretty good, playing quite nicely. Difference being, to the V100, it's not as thick as the V100s, and it's not as heavy as a result, but it does still have some contouring on the front, which is nice. So quite a different guitar, not one I've seen before, and a lot of people, there's the buying market out there seems to be a bit in love with the V100s. This isn't bad, not at all bad. I couldn't find too much to fault on this, other than the frets were really uneven, so a lot of hard work on the frets to get this even to play as well as it does now. So there we go. Hope that was interesting. Not a V100, this is just a vintage Les Paul from an earlier era or an earlier age before Trev Wilkinson arrived, but not a bad guitar, quite enjoyable to play. So I shall hang it up on the peg and we shall move on to something else.